Today we're talking about fashion and accessories in travel retail, what's changed and what travel retailers and airports should be thinking about and prioritising in the post-COVID world. At HDH, we work with brands on both a wholesale basis and a retail basis, and also with airports as well. And so many of our conversations are about how to rebuild the business and be ready for when the passengers return. So how easy is this, and what are the key considerations for all of the different levels of the travel business? Travel has faced and continues to face its most challenging period ever. Travel has faced challenges before, but the drop in passenger numbers has always been relatively short. It's normally bounced back, even after such major world events as 9/11 or the SARS crisis or the oil crisis. It's always managed to bounce back relatively quickly, and the drop in passenger numbers has been really just a blip. But the COVID crisis is so different because the drop in passengers is so prolonged and the length of time is so unknown. This period of downtime, we don't know how long it's going to be. So the question is, how do you use this time? How do you go about planning? How can you get ahead? It's not easy at the moment for anyone in the business. Buying teams are smaller, people have sadly lost their jobs, the industry really has been suffering. But it's how and it's when that the business comes back that we need to focus on. When the business comes back is the question that we can't answer. It really depends on the different countries in the world and their individual responses to the pandemic and also their rollout of the vaccine programme. This is really going to be dictating when the recovery will start. But how retailers recover when the recovery starts is absolutely in the retailer's gift. And it's good planning now that will really make the difference when we're talking about a successful restart. So when planning for restarting, the place to absolutely start is with the customer. I mean, really that hasn't changed, but sometimes I think in the past the customer has got a little bit lost in the mix of all the margins and deals and so on. We absolutely now have to focus on the customer, who they are, who will travel, and how will they have changed. And that needs to govern the product decisions that are made. The motivations, the destinations, the attitudes of people will have been altered by COVID, and we really are in a different reality now, and we have to think about the impact on the expectations that these people will have from the product offer when they start to travel again. We absolutely expect that it will be leisure travellers who return first. We do expect business travellers to return, but the leisure travellers will most likely return first. They will be a mixture of people. There'll be probably older people there who have had their vaccinations and then feel that they have the confidence to travel again. And then there will be also a very strong younger demographic whose wings have been clipped for the last year or so. They're absolutely desperate for a change of scene. They just want to get away and have some great experiences in the world again. So with that in mind, self-treating, gifting, and ways to remember their trip will be important when it comes to the purchasing decisions that they make. I don't mean souvenirs, but I mean things that will help them remember the first trip that they took away after the COVID crisis started to resolve itself. Business travel will absolutely return, as I said before, but it won't be yet as strongly as it was previously, but it will grow. There has been talk about workations, meaning where business travellers will go away for longer periods of time and there'll be a blend of work and leisure within their trip. So it may mean that people travelling on business will have their families join them at some point, but then will spend part of the time away working as well. Will it happen? It's too early to say. My advice would be to be focusing strongly on your leisure passengers initially. There have been changes within airport retail offers following the reopening after COVID. There are some brands and there are some stores which have sadly closed due to not being able to survive the crisis. And so there are vacancies in airports. There are opportunities right now for new brands or new operators to enter the market. What is interesting is some of the major travel retail operators at the moment are very much focusing and consolidating back into their core categories. And by that I mean where they may have had standalone stores where they operated a shop on behalf of a single brand, or if they had a multi-brand store, and these could often be fashion and accessories. These have not necessarily survived the crisis, and those travel retail operators have relinquished the spaces and have just returned to operating their main core categories within their main duty-free spaces. This is a safe option. Who can blame them? It's been such a difficult time. But what that could mean is that some of the interest and some of the more fascinating shops that had some freshness, some newness, some real interesting appeal will no longer be there. Again, the advice from us would be that there has to be some level of managed risk in the return. There has to be some element of the open to buy, which is dedicated to newness, which is bringing new brands and freshness in. There's so many new brands that buyers will want to experience, and we need to maybe be a little bit braver, but in a very, very managed way. Thinking about new brands and categories within fashion and accessories in travel, some brands have traditionally dominated. We all know who they are. There are certain brands who you see in virtually every single major international airport in the world. I think we need to be prepared for some of these brands not to feel as relevant when we come out of the pandemic and start to travel again. Actually, some of these brands had already begun to be a little bit on the wane just before COVID hit anyway. So I would recommend that buyers begin to think about trends which have become a little bit more relevant during the COVID crisis. So think about leisure and sportswear brands. Now, I'm not suggesting we're all going to live in our jogging bottoms for the rest of our lives, but I do think that with this passenger base who is more focused on leisure, there will be more of an interest in athleisure and sportswear brands, which can be underrepresented in many airports' retail offer. Think also about maybe bringing a fresher aesthetic into the brands that are stocked in airports. Scandinavian brands have had a huge impact on fashion trends recently, and that look is somewhat lacking in many airports across the world. So maybe think about brands that have a little bit more of an interesting look and feel, a little bit more modern. Also, think about more accessible price points. We're potentially talking about a different customer base travelling now, and they may well find that they want and need price points that are a little bit more reachable. Also, include brands which have genuinely sustainable credentials. The onus is absolutely on retailers and brands to be more environmentally responsible, but no one buys into a brand just because it says it's sustainable. The brand also has to fit the passenger's aesthetic, it has to fit their price point, and it has to fit their lifestyle. And sustainable claims need to be believable. Do also think about margins and be realistic. There may have to be some give at all levels because everybody has suffered. So in conclusion, there's 4 main takeaways. First of all, make it customer focused. Secondly, be brave, but do manage and limit the risk. Thirdly, diversify and adapt your business to new merchandising strategies. Stock and inventory pressures are real, but make sure you keep the offer fresh with newness. And fourthly, choose brands who have credibility in sustainability and greener initiatives. Hopefully, this approach will help to underpin a successful rebuilding for fashion accessories brands in the travel retail business.